Hey everybody, and welcome to Twin Talk, a video discussion show where twin brothers Chris and Kevin drink and draw. We're talking about comic books, movies, and all things pop culture. We're your hosts, Chris Hart,
Kevin Hart,
and today we're going to be talking about our favorite Spider-Man comics. First things off the bat, this is not going to be a top 5 greatest Spider-Man stories ever told. You know, there's a million videos on YouTube for that. This is going to be simply a collection of our favorite Spider-Man stories over the last few years that impacted us personally and that we had a great time reading and that we appreciated things in, whether it be the story, the art, or character development. So with that being said, Kevin, start us off here. What do you got?
I'm going to start off with Spider-Man Return of the Goblin. It collects Peter Parker Spider-Man issues number 44 to 47 with the story A Death in the Family. Written by Paul Jenkins with art by Umberto Ramos. And honestly, as a kid, man, I remember my uncle, Theo Jr., if you're watching this book really impacted me. I'd never seen Spider-Man look like this before. It was so wild for the time. His depiction, especially of the Green Goblin, that's what I love about this. It really showcases Norman Osborn's insanity, the duality between him and the Green Goblin. Even one eye is like drawn different.
One of them's like kooky and
yeah,
small.
exactly. One eye's huge. Everything about it, you know, seeing from the original classics, combing through that with the Green Goblin to see this kind of like almost like an updated version of the character. It really like stuck with me as a kid. And it's just, it really, like, every moment of this book is, like, in the rain. It's a very kind of, like, a dark story. Not the darkest I've ever seen, but it deals with the events of, like, Harry Osborn's death and the Spectacular Spider-Man number 200. And it also talks about the death of Gwen Stacy in the Amazing Spider-Man issue 121 back in the 70s. So it deals with, really, they're, like, the good and evil of Peter Parker's Spider-Man and Norman Osborn's Green Goblin. And it just showcases their eternal, like, conflict. Almost like the Batman and the Joker of, like... Mm-hmm. Like, Norman Osborn's, like, hell-bent. Harry's dead. He's the father without a son. And Peter's the son without a father, you know, with Uncle Ben and his own father. So it really showcases, like, the twisted ways of Norman throughout this book. Like, he kind of challenges Peter in a fight to the death, really, of, like, to try and break his integrity. Peter, obviously, being the great guy that he is, despite even the death of his love, he overcomes it. Like, and that's what I really enjoyed about this book.
What year was that book? That was 2002, you said?
Came out in 2002, yep.
Yeah, so this is coming, like you said, right off the hype of the first Spider-Man live-action film with Tobey Maguire, Sam Raimi. I remember, like you said, our Theo Jr., our uncle, would come back with these. He would do laundry at our grandparents' house with this big-ass bag of laundry and an even bigger bag of comics. And he was collecting the single issues of this at the time.
Yep.
And like you said, this. Let me take a look at this thing. This is our introduction to one of my favorite Spider-Man artists, Umberto Ramos. He's gotten a lot better since then, honestly. When you compare this to some of his later issues,
some of it's a little sloppy in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, you can see he's developing his style, and like you said, he's got a very it's almost like a harsh style. Like, you either love it or you hate it. It's super cartoony. Like, the anatomy and proportions are off, but and I'm not a guy that, like, some people will tell you that this shoulder needs to be here and this and that. It's cartooning, guys. Like, relax. There was one scene in this where it shows the Goblin, like, Norman's, like, talking to basically himself as the Goblin, and he's, like, talking to the mask, basically.
Yeah.
And, you know, he puts it on and just, like, immediately becomes a different person. So I thought that was cool to showcase that, like, Jekyll and Hyde side of him.
Yeah, there was some funny moments, too, as I, like, reread it recently. Like, this is his way of trying to get, like he's already killed Gwen Stacy, right? Like, the Goblin's already taken the very best from Peter Parker's life. His tactics in this book were kind of funny, too, because, like, his whole reason is that Peter denied, you know, taking on the mantle or the legacy of the Green Goblin. Harry's obviously dead. Norman's like, you're not worthy. He was never worthy. He was so weak, blah, blah, blah. But his greatest foe, Spider-Man, he wants him to take the Goblin serum and kind of live up to his mantle because he's not going to be the Green Goblin forever. He's kind of realizing with, like, his own mortality and everything. But Peter clearly, obviously refuses not to succumb to that. So he's, like, hell-bent on this. It's either you die or I die. And the funniest thing to me is the tactics of what he does. Like, first, Flash Thompson, he's, like, a recovering addict. He, like... kidnaps him, boozes him up with alcohol.
I remember being really sad about that.
It was sad, it was, because he was, like, trying to get back on the straight and narrow. And Peter, at this point in his life, is working as a professor at the school. And so he sends him, you know, he's got, like, this Oscorp tanker heading straight for the building that Peter works at. And the funniest part to me is when I read it, like, he slams in the building, the hamster. The hamster in Peter Parker's professor room died. All the gloves are off at this point. Like, to me, as I was rereading that, I was like, man, that's funny. Like, that was a catalyst in this book.
That was the only casualty of that whole thing? Was it
pretty much, yeah. I mean, obviously, he's, like, slamming into the cars and, like, in the city. But to me, I was like, the fact that he wrote that in was like, the hamster's dead. it's war. Like forget Gwen Stacy.
I have to reread that. It's been a while since I read that because I was a big fan of Dan Slott and Ramos's later stuff.
The thing I just love about this book is that in the end, Peter ultimately wins because he refuses to give in to the Goblin's demands of killing him, really. And he says, if I kill you, I basically break the memory of Gwen. It just really showed that, like, even in our greatest tragedies, Peter Parker is always rose above it. So it was just inspiring to me as a kid, and it's always kind of held a personal spot in my heart. All right, let's move on to number 2. What's your pick, dude?
Well, just going on the point you made, too, about how Norman and Peter have this, like, eternal conflict that's reminiscent of Batman and Joker. Right. I personally think that they're, like, on that level, if not better, of a superhero-villain rivalry than Batman and Joker, is the Goblin and Spider-Man. And that's what leads us into our next one, is the repercussions of Gwen Stacy's death in Spider-Man Blue. This book is from the creative team of Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, most famously known for Batman The Long Halloween. Yep. And they did a series of Marvel comics. They did Daredevil Yellow, Spider-Man Blue, and Hulk Gray. But this one, I just reread it. Fantastic cartooning in it. It's pretty much Tim Sale and Jeff Loeb doing their take on Stan Lee and
the classics.
John Romita. Yeah. So what happens is they're covering, it's a Peter Parker in current time monologuing a story that takes place during issues of The Amazing Spider-Man 40 to 47. Issue 40 is famous as, the Green Goblin finally gets revealed as Norman Osborn. Throughout the events of issue 40 to 47, we see that, there's different, the Rhino, he fights the Rhino, the Lizard, the Goblin. Flash Thompson enlists in the army because Spider-Man saves him. So basically it culminates in this giant going away party for Flash Thompson, where the gang's all there, and Kraven the Hunter attacks the party because he smells Spider-Man's scent, which actually he kidnaps Harry Osborn because Peter lent him his aftershave, which is such a Stanley thing, but it works. It's
cheeseball.
It really works. Especially told in modern storytelling. If you go back and read some old, there's just something about those old '60s Spider-Mans that they just had a magic going. And when you see storytellers like Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale, kind of retell it in a modern way,
like a love letter.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's a love letter, and this is them doing their riff on that. The art is gorgeous. In the back, behind the scenes content, Tim Sale's just gushing over how much he had to study John Romita and how beautiful he drew women. And, he's the master of drawing women because he drew, the two loves of Peter's life, Mary Jane and Gwen Stacy. This book is basically about trauma and healing and grief and mourning and how to love again after you lose someone that, you see yourself spending the rest of your life with. We know that, the infamous story of the death of Gwen Stacy, the Green Goblin, the bridge, the neck snapping and everything. Yeah. So this is basically, like I said, it starts off with Peter doing this monologue of the events of issues 40 through 47, and he's just recalling a very specific time in Spider-Man's history. And it's such a gem, honestly.
It's just him kind of thinking about
the past.
And moving on.
And moving on. But and you could just tell he was robbed of Gwen.
Yeah.
But without that, he would never have had, married Mary Jane. Basically, the story ends with, Mary Jane is in the attic with Peter. You find out that he's making these cassette tapes for voice recordings of him talking to Gwen. Obviously, she'll never hear them because she's passed away. And he even says that. He's like, no one's ever going to hear it. I don't know why I'm doing this, but I feel like I need to talk to you every time around Valentine's Day because that's when the book starts. And he just recounts this tale of how he met Gwen and how he met MJ. And the whole heart of it is Mary Jane, goes up to the attic with Peter. And she's like, oh, I've been listening to you. Tell Gwen I said hey. And I miss her too.
Yeah, it was a nice nod.
And you just see Mary Jane was such and that was the whole point of the story, that basically it ends with Peter saying that Mary Jane was kind of this immature, life's a party and MJ's the cake type thing. But the realization that Gwen died humbled all of them, that circle of friends.
The group of friends, yeah.
And they realized that they're not immortal. They're all going to pass on one day. And that kind of made Mary Jane become, the love of his life eventually. So this story basically tells that, and I really enjoyed reading it. I highly recommend it. All right, next on the list, we're going down to Spider-Man Marvel Knights, Down Among the Dead Men. It was actually kind of its own thing, issues 1 through 4. Similar to how DC's doing the Black Label now.
Yeah, Marvel Knights was almost like an Elseworld. Yeah, but it's got story by Mark Millar.
Yep. You got it, kid.
Or Mark Miller, however you want to say it.
No, it's Millar. It's established Millar.
And then you got the absolutely gorgeous, as I was rereading this, I was just gushing over it, Terry Dodson, on illustrations with his wife, the power couple, Rachel Dodson, doing the inks. This book, it's like, again, not the strongest ever written, but it's a good time. Very of the time. I think it came out in like 2004-ish. But it's, you know, they're talking about like how VHS is going to make a comeback. And my God, did they predict that? They said that vinyl, it's even in this comic book, first page, vinyl's going to make a comeback. So I don't know if Millar like saw the future, but if he says anything else about the future, definitely bet on that. But it's got like a lot of, again, Spider-Man's greatest rogues next to Batman, in my opinion. Green Goblin starts off. You got Vulture in this one, Electro. You got the Owl, even from Daredevil's kind of like lore.
That's right, he's in that. I forgot. Yeah.
He's in. It's very cool, but it's like it was just gorgeous to look at. Like the Avengers are in this too. Like they do very little to help Peter Parker out because apparently
they douchey to him.
They do because they don't know who he is. The whole thing is that his secret identity gets revealed, and this is before Civil War when he like came out, so to speak, to the world of that Peter Parker Spider-Man. So he was like very protective of it, but like one of his old foes actually turns out to know his identity. I'm choking here, dude.
It's such a beautiful story that Beer will do.
It deals a lot with his secret identity being revealed. Apparently, one of his old foes, we don't know who it is. It's kind of like a whole mystery of who is gunning for Peter Parker's Spider-Man. Aunt May is actually taken, and Mary Jane's kind of like put in like a safe house by Peter. So he's like frantic about trying to save Aunt May, and he's going through it. That's one of my favorite things. Is almost like the first Spider-Man movie is when he gets like the pumpkin bomb and his face gets like torn apart. The mask
destroyed, yeah.
I am a sucker for a battle damage suit, any hero. So this comic book, he really does go through it. That fight with Electro, Max Dillon's Electro in the city, I remember just like absolutely being blown away as a kid reading this, and even kind of rereading it recently. I was like, I remember
loving
gorgeous.
Electro's mask in this because like
it was a redesign.
It was a redesign. Like sometimes it would have like that wacky '60s like out, but then like the mask would like conform to like basically like a normal like helmet.
Yeah. Whenever he was using his powers, it kind of
another thing I loved about this that I specifically remember is the first issue. The opening scene is like a dude in like Little Italy, basically taking out like a deli. You know, he's like taking out the trash. They're opening up for business. They're taking out the trash, and they go into the dumpster area, and there's like Peter as Spider-Man just destroyed. He just
like in the fetal position.
Yeah, he just got wrecked.
And he's like, run.
Yeah, and like you said, the art is gorgeous. Terry Dodson is a master.
One of my favorite scenes, though, of this book is Adrian Toomes, the Vulture. I think it's at the end of issue 3. Peter Parker has gone through it.
There it is.
He's completely disheveled. He's like in the hospital. Even the surgeons are like, get real. We got to take the mask off, and they just throw his mask away. And Peter Parker's just his identity is getting all over the place in the public. J. Jonah Jameson actually finds out who he is by the end of this book, but. Like, the fact that the Vulture hunts him down and comes in to the hospital room, I just remember being blown away by that. And he says, I got to read it. He says, take a look at the Discovery Channel, sweetheart. This is what vultures do. And it's just like an incredible...
Waiting for him to die.
Incredible cliffhanger to end on. It's just the Vulture coming in, like, waiting for Peter just, croak. So it was...
I really love that Vulture design, too, the black and red.
Yeah.
As opposed to, like, the green and white.
Well, that's the thing is, like, with the Marvel Knights, it was kind of like... A fresh approach on the characters, kind of like some redesigns on the suits with Electro and Vulture.
With a classic feel to it. They're definitely paying homage to the classic stuff too.
Yeah,
the one complaint I do have about the art in this book, and like I said, I love the Dodsons. A chubby Peter Parker.
Chubby?
I don't like his Peter Parker. He's got he looks like chubby. I don't like his hair.
Yeah,
something about him is off to me.
He's more of like I think like an older Peter Parker. He's obviously
at that point he's probably like 30 years old, teaching as a professor.
Yeah, and every time I read this, like I hear the Spider-Man cartoon from the '90s. That Peter Parker. Okay, I hear his voice when I read this, so it's kind of funny. But it was just like again, not the greatest written Spider-Man, but just something that stuck with me personally. That I just remember absolutely gushing over with the art, and even today I was still blown away by it.
That even ends. There's actually 2 more volumes of that. That is a complete story
involving Venom, Doc Ock, Scorpion,
and basically like Aunt May ends up being like buried alive.
Yeah,
and he has got to go find her, and that's a good read. Highly recommend that too.
It's a good mystery that like actually lends you to lead the rest of the story. And again, just the Rogues Gallery is just out in full effect in this book, and that's why I love it so much.
Next on the list. Amazing Spider-Man, New Ways to Die, written by Dan Slott, art by John Romita Jr. This is, I think, in my opinion, John Romita Jr.'s finest finest work. Yeah. Sometimes he's very hit or miss. Sometimes he get like his deadlines in. You can tell he's just like noodling it in and getting sloppy. For instance, the Superman DC books I felt were completely like deadline
phoned in.
Yeah. This is like top tier. Klaus Jensen inks, Dean White colors. I think JR is on fire when he works with these people. This book is basically the origin story of Anti-Venom. After Secret Invasion, Norman Osborn is basically like a hero. He's protected by the law because he like stopped a Skrull invasion on planet Earth. Right. He shot him in the head. Norman Osborn is basically like...
Gets a free pass.
Yeah, he gets a free pass on anything. He's the leader of the Thunderbolts at this time, who are posing as the Avengers. They're like government-sanctioned team. Almost like the Suicide Squad. Yeah.
Marvel Suicide Squad, basically.
But what's cool about it is that, like, it's Norman Osborn. So it's not going to be the Avengers that are working for him. He's got Bullseye posing as Hawkeye, which I thought was badass. Mm-hmm. He's got Dakin pretending to be Wolverine. And he's got Matt Gargan, who was formerly Scorpion, is now the new Venom at this point in Amazing Spider-Man comics. And he's posing as Spider-Man. So it's pretty cool to see, like, the... especially now with politics, like you see like the front of like, oh, this hero, the Avenger.
Propaganda almost.
Yeah. And then like behind the scenes, it's just shady business. It's Norman Osborn. The dude's a murderer.
Psychopath.
But like I said, top tier cartooning, amazing art by John Romita Jr. The story of Anti-Venom is basically Eddie Brock, who is the original Venom, has cancer. He's gotten rid of the symbiote at this time. He has cancer. He's terminal. He's working at like a soup kitchen trying to feed people, pay for his sins of being Venom. And he's still living with that like duality. He's still got some like of the symbiote in his blood. So he like every time he like looks in the mirror, all he sees is the monster. And there's an amazing side story with Adi Granov, who does the art of Iron Man. There's like famous Iron Man photos.
Yeah.
And he does like a little side story of Eddie Brock working at the soup kitchen and basically like trying to keep his cool until this one guy who's like an ingrate at the soup kitchen like pisses him off and he like attacks him and runs away and stuff. And it's kind of tragic when you see like Eddie Brock, like he's like this frail man trying to pay for his sins of being this like villain for so long that hurt so many people. Mr. Negative at the time, who was like working at the homeless shelter, sees that he wants to be better, so he like basically like Jesus Christ him and like gives him like these like antibodies that like mold with the symbiote in his blood cells, and he becomes a force for good, and he ends up fighting Matt Gargan's Venom in this. And Peter Parker goes through it. Like you said, if you're a sucker for Spider-Man going through it, this is your book, man. He's got rips on like every page, blood spewing from the mouth.
I don't think any character's gone through it more than Peter Parker Spider-Man.
Yeah. But that to me, like Dan Slott, some people love or hate his run on Spider-Man. Some people say he overstayed his welcome. I thought he did a good job with the character from Brand New Day onward. I thought he had a lot of cool ideas, and to me, this is probably like his best storytelling. Moving on, I'm kind of staying on this run here. I had a really good time reading these Spider-Man comic books. Like for a while, they were kicking ass. They really were. Like between Gauntlet, Brand New Day, and all these different things. This one is Amazing Spider-Man: American Son, and it is written by Joe Kelly, art by Phil Jimenez, and Marco Cicchetto. Really solid stuff here. To me, Spider-Man works best when it's got a lot of family drama between the Osborns and Peter Parker, and just like that clique of friends. This one deals with basically Harry Osborn's trauma of being Norman's son, between being the Goblin in the past and just never being enough for Norman. You could just tell that it just takes a toll on him mentally.
Yeah.
There's even one scene too in this book where it shows Norman gives Harry a bike for his birthday or something, and Harry like foolishly lets a kid get on it, and the kid steals the bike. Obviously, he goes and he tells his dad, like, oh, the kid stole my bike, and Norman Osborn's like, get in the car.
Of course, it's his fault.
Yeah, and Norman's like, get in the car, and he brings a baseball bat, and they drive to the kid that stole the bike. Norman gets out, and you think he's gonna like protect his son. Like I remember reading this and being like, hell yeah, get the bully. That was your son's bike. Defend him. And you see like a panel of Norman taking a baseball bat to the kid, and the kid's like, no, and then you just see Norman just destroys the bike.
Yep.
And then he grabs Harry's hand and he walks back. He's like, see, what did we learn today? He's like, now we learned that if I give you something nice, you're going to cherish it next time. You're not going to let people steal it. You're going to take care of it. I was like, yeah. So like, there's obviously a psychosis with this man.
Yeah, a lot of family trauma going on.
He's not well. So you can understand Harry in this. This is the whole dark green time where Norman's in control. He's leading the Thunderbolts. He's a government-sanctioned hero. And he basically wants Harry to come in and be like the Captain America to his Dark Avengers. And Harry wants none of it until he realizes that his fiance, Lily Hollister, she was a problem, man. I remember like going through these issues, and you want to like her so bad because she was like a new character at the time. She feels like a part of the gang. You kind of like rooting for Harry, like, oh, he's finally in love with this beautiful girl. And then you find out that she is this villain menace who she basically got
a
Goblin.
New character.
Yeah, she was a new...
Basically the new Goblin.
Yeah, she was a new form of Goblin. She was a female Goblin. And then you find out that she's pregnant with Harry's son. But it's not Harry's son. You find out that it's Norman's son, which is douche
So
level
messed up.
to the extreme, yeah. A lot of people remember the Gwen Stacy.
That's a sin.
Yeah. The Gwen Stacy storyline where apparently... J. Michael Straczynski thought it was okay to impregnate Gwen Stacy with Norman.
A lot of
Baby.
fans don't think that's canon.
That's not canon. Yeah, we don't like that one. Lily Hollister though, she's a little hoe, so we're gonna let her take the one on this one. She has Norman's baby. She's pregnant, so Harry feels like he needs to protect his family. So he's like, I'll do whatever it takes to make this family whole. So he goes with Norman. And what's really cool about this is that there's a really suspenseful scene where Spider-Man basically like. With the Invisible Woman, kidnaps Venom, and he poses as Venom from a suit that Reed Richards made that makes it look like the symbiote, but it's just Peter posing as Venom to like basically be like an agent, a secret agent to get in. And it's a really good scene, and you could feel the tension. You're just waiting for Peter to get picked off because there's one scene where they have this like mutant body that like goes to attack Norman, and Peter as Venom protects Norman. And it's like he almost blows his character because it's like he's still being a hero,
Right. Yeah.
So it's like okay, so like they think he's a little sus, and Dakin, who's pretending to be Wolverine, can smell that it's not Venom. He's like something's off, and then eventually he gets outed. Norman torches his ass, and then you see Harry comes in and basically like tries to save his friend. I don't think he knows that he's Peter at this point in the book, but you could tell that he like knows that he did wrong. He's trying to save Spider-Man, who we know is his friend Peter, and it's just a very compelling story.
That's
all this
Norman
drama.
Norman Osborn's like Iron Patriot suit.
Yes, yeah, that's the thing.
That
too.
Reminds me so much of like the Iron Man 3 suit.
That's what it was based
I
off
always
of,
think
yeah.
of that. Yeah, I was like,
This came before Iron Man 3, and they
Mm-hmm.
did, they made Rhodey, Iron Patriot, and Iron Man 3, but I would have loved...
I immediately think of that.
I would love to see an Iron Patriot, Norman Osborn, like, live-action movie.
Yep.
After they do him great justice as Green Goblin
Yeah.
and this new thing, but who knows what the future holds for that, but definitely one of my favorite stories. Very suspenseful, tension, family drama, and like I said, Spider-Man works best when it has all this, like, soap opera drama, and this one is chock full of it. Going back to what we said about getting, the best bang for your buck with the Rogues Gallery, brings us to Origin of the Species. Written by Mark Waid, illustrated by Paul Azuceta. A very unique art style for this artist. It's very like loose, but heavy on the inks at the same time. It's kind of like a less is more approach.
Yeah. With incredible cover work by, I believe, Marko Derjevic.
Yes, yeah.
Incredible
This doesn't even
artist.
do it justice. I have the single issues too, and if you put them all together, it makes these images.
It all
front and
leads
back
up to it, yeah.
And it has like, everybody's in it. Molten Man, Sandman, Shocker, Kraven, Mr. Negative, Harry Osborn. Even the dude that pretended to be Spider-Man at Brand New Day with like Spider-Man's mask and a gun. Like that's a deep cut at the time. But this book is awesome because like I said, Spider-Man works best when it's got like that friend circle. So it basically starts off with Dr. Octopus is hiring all these mercenaries or villains to go get the baby of Norman Osborn and Lily Hollister, which is Menace and Green Goblin, because he feels that it's going to be like this genetic
Supremacy.
like this just genetically
It's just
altered
Norman's crazy
specimen.
thing. Yeah.
And of course, and there's one scene in it too where they're all at the coffee bean, and this book starts off perfectly. It's got Peter at this time is basically fired from the Bugle. It's a heat wave, and he has no money for rent, and his landlord is selling off his clothes.
That's Normie, right? Is the baby Normie?
No. This is actually
new one?
Stanley.
Stanley,
Yeah,
okay.
Normie's from the old run of this
Yeah.
Spectacular, but this is Stanley, and this is really tragic, honestly. Like I said, from American Son, we find out that Norman, is having a baby with Harry's fiance, which is so messed up. And then this one starts off with Peter. He's looking for work. He can't find work. He's selling off cameras. He's selling off his clothes. His landlady's selling his clothes. And all he has left in his closet is a Christmas sweater. And it's August in a heat wave. And he's on the bus. He's got no money for bus fare.
Cardigan.
And then they end up going to the coffee bean. And who comes through is Lily Hollister. about to give birth to this freaking demon child that is going to be the Goblin Prince, basically. And then we see
crazy stuff, man.
It's pretty nuts, yeah. And it's great though because like they're just like hanging out. She comes through on a Goblin glider, and then who shows up?
Baby,
of course,
baby bump and all.
you know, she's about to give birth, and then the one panel says, "I love it." I want to throw it up on the screen too when we get it. And here comes Otto, and it just says, "Trust me, I'm a doctor." And it shows Dr. Octopus comes in. And he wants the baby. He wants to experiment on this thing and use it for God knows what. But basically, and this is a fun, not a lot of like compelling story stuff. It's just very simple. Doc Ock and these villains want the baby because it's going to be like this like genetic specimen. Peter obviously knows that's the wrong thing. He steals the baby. He's going across town. He's being blacklisted by J. Jonah Jameson as like a kidnapper, basically baby thief. So nothing's going right for him.
Fox News, baby.
Yeah, nothing's going right for Peter in this. And that is when Spider-Man comics are at their purest. Is when Peter Parker's just beaten down into the grindstone and obviously always comes off the hero at the end of the day. My favorite thing about this book, thank God, is he eventually returns the baby to Harry, does a DNA sample, and it is Harry's baby. Thank God. Because
thank God. We got a real Jerry Springer thing going on.
Yeah, because nobody, I couldn't handle another Norman, you know, like just like impregnating everybody as women. Because he's so evil as is, and like that's just like the ultimate evil.
It's just like gross. Yeah, it's just like for shock value.
Yeah. But like, you know, that's what makes him Spider-Man's biggest villain. And that's why I said, like, to me, it rivals the Joker. Because to me, Norman Osborn has always been the most personal of villains to Peter Parker's Spider-Man. And even when we were picking our books for our top favorite Spider-Man books, I was like thinking we'd get like one of each, Doc Ock or, you know, Sinister Six, blah, 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 something, the Lizard. But it really goes to show how powerful of a character Norman Osborn is.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, that personal trials and tribulations with Norman and Harry and the group of friends is really what makes Amazing Spider-Man comic books stand out, and that's when they're on the top of their game. So that was our personal favorite books. A lot of different art styles and cartooning and writers and doing their thing. Really cool stuff. We highly recommend all these books. Again, this is not, you know, the top 5 greatest ever told. This is just our personal books that made an impact on us. A lot of Spider-Man content coming up with No Way Home, set to release in December. We're going to review every movie, and we're really looking forward to that. We hope you guys check out these comic books. Spider-Man is my personal favorite character next to Batman. I have pretty much every Amazing Spider-Man issue ever in all my long boxes at the apartment.
Long boxes.
What is it? Put a fox in a box of socks next to the Stop and Shop.
The Departed.
We had a really good time doing this. Just going back and reading comic books for the first time in a long time. Felt right.
Yeah.
Even the great Frank Miller said there's an intimacy that someone has when they're just sitting there. It's just you in the comic book, and that story comes to life. Obviously, you're reading someone else's creations, but your imagination goes wild. The voices of these characters become real to you. You appreciate the art styles, and it inspires you to be better in every form.
It's a nice break from TikTok and the short attention span to kind of sit there, gush over the details, kind of take that moment to be one-on-one with a form of creativity that might inspire you.
And if you love the movies and you've never read a comic, we highly recommend going back and reading some of the classics. The source material is truly inspiring stuff. Without it, there would be no movies.
Exactly.
So go back and appreciate it. Support the original art form that is comic books.
Anyways, that about wraps up today's episode of Twin Talk. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, comment below to join the discussion, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content. We'll see you next time.
Peace!